Oh, welcome back to another episode of the Battle Turtle. Sorry, couldn't help myself. Today we're going to talk about the Cybergun Thompson M1A1 submachine gun. If you haven't noticed, I had one earlier video with my Fallout outfit, which I showed the gun, but I hadn't done any any videos about the gun itself. So I'd give a good opportunity to do an explanation, a short video about the gun, and show you what some of the good, the pros, the cons, and do a little actually testing at about 65 feet at a couple of targets. So first we'll do is cover the gun itself. Now the gun itself actually looks pretty nice. If you can see, it's a pretty decent looking weapon. The gun is all metal. It's a metal frame, metal magazine, metal barrel, metal trigger guard, metal trigger. They did a pretty good job with the metal parts. The wood is faux wood. It's all plastic with a wood-like grain. It does look really nice. I've had a few people from a distance think it was a real wood look. The only downside is that where it has the seams along the edge, you can see it's pretty rough. I'm sure if you file down a little bit, make it a little nice, but I wouldn't mess with it because you might take it a little too far and make it look even worse. So just leave it the way it is. It looks fine as long as you don't look at the seams. Someone doesn't get too close, look at the seams. They can't really see the gun. It has a pretty good weight to it, especially since the whole frame of the gun is metal. So you do feel it. If you're someone who's not used to carrying a lot of weights, it might wear on you, especially if you're running around a field. The magazines are also metal, and they're designed like the original ones. They have a little ridge here that fits inside a cutout on the bottom, which they slip right in. They're of course high capacity, around 450 rounds, so they hold a lot of ammunition. They'll last a while, and the gun shoots around 340 to 360 feet per second, .20 gram BBs. So I'll be shooting with .25s. I prefer .25s, especially in this gun, for good reason. Now I'll explain that why. But .25s are good, like middle row between heavy and light. But the problem with this gun is probably its biggest drawback is its hop-up unit. It has a terrible hop-up unit. It's located right here where the shell ejection port would be on a real Thompson submachine gun, and it's exposed. It's not like on most guns where it's behind the charging handle. See, the charging handle, it's functional. It doesn't work when you pull the trigger. It's just there for looks, and behind there is just the gearbox, so there's nothing really there to do. It's just there for looks. The hop-up is over here, and you mess with it at the shell ejection port. It's a little dial, and what's the problem with the hop-up is when you use .20s, even with it all the way off, it still has an overhop issue. Even with it fully off at .20s, it'll travel straight for a period, and you hit about between 40 and 45 yards, and the BB will shoot right up, regardless, which has become a pain in the butt sometimes when you're trying to hit somebody behind a target. You get it just right, and then it hits right above what the target is and shoots right above their head. So the .25 seem to help that a lot. They bring a little more weight down on it. It'll give it slower feet per second, but it will keep it a more straight trajectory. The sight it comes with, of course, there's no option for rails or anything like that, which to me isn't a downside. I know some people get all upset, like, oh, there's no rail options, I can't tactical it. For me, that's fine, because you don't really need all that junk you had on the guns anyway. It has a metal front sight and a rear dovetail sight on the back here. What's interesting about the dovetail sight is that it has a dovetail on the top, the little notch, like most guns would, and it has a small pinhole on the bottom. Now, when we talk about the overhop issue, I found that using the dovetail ends up having the BB always shoot high, but if you aim with the front sight through the peephole on the bottom, it actually gets pretty dead on. I'm going to do a shooting demonstration of the two of them. The first shooting demonstration will use the front sight with the dovetail. The second shooting demonstration will use the front sight with the little peephole on the bottom to show you the difference that it actually does make. It doesn't have much of adjustment for windage. You can move it a little bit left and right. There's not too much play. What's neat and what isn't neat about the gun, too, another downside, is it does have the military markings, but they're not stamped in. They're actually just painted on. I don't know if you can see, but this one over here is already starting to wear off on the paint, and then it had that sticker that comes on. That warning sticker was sitting right here on top of the gun. When I took it off and I used some cleaning solution to get the residue off, I ended up wearing some of the other painted on stuff here that said Thompson on the top. So that is a downside if you're looking for a gun that looks authentic. You're not, as with all the proper markings, like this one has US property on it. Looks pretty neat, but it will eventually wear off. It is just paint, and this is wearing off just from rubbing against my body, especially from sweat. but the gun itself still functions. It still looks good. If you're looking for a less expensive version of Thompson, especially if you do like World War II Airsoft, this will fit your needs. The magazine and the safety and fire selection is a little different than modern guns for those who aren't used to it. This here is the safety in the back and fire on the front. So it's up here. It's a little inconvenient sometimes unless you get used to it. In the back here is semi-auto and in full auto. So you got to toggle two little knobs here. If you do it right, you can fire between safe and full and semi and full with just one hand if you can move it around properly. But sometimes it's the pain, which also goes into pain of the gun because the gearbox tends to jam on semi-auto if you fire it too quickly. So I'm used to shooting more modern firearms, so I'm constantly just little taps on the trigger, and if you do that too often, it'll jam it in semi-auto. You got to flip it to full auto, fire burst, then back at the semi-auto to use semi-automatic again. The burst will clear it out and restart it. Another odd feature compared to modern guns, for those who aren't used to older firearms, is the magazine release is right here. Push this down with one hand, and then you can remove the magazine. It's a very odd location, but that's where it is. That's the way they made the original ones. We got to remember this gun was designed in 1918. Was originally meant to go over to World War I in 1919. Of course, World War I didn't last 1919. Most people at the time thought it would, and they were originally going to be first issued in early 1919 for the U.S. Army soldiers, but it never made it there before the end of the war. So the technology gun is fairly old, but it was pretty good for its era. You, of course, fire 45 pistol ammo, and it was meant for a close-range, inside trench fighting semi-automatic weapon to clear, which also called it a trench room, because originally you could take the buttstock off and just hold it as a sweeping weapon with the front pistol grip. The gun, though, for an airsoft isn't bad. I mean, it's a little complicated to take apart, too. You got all this other stuff that's come off, so unless you have to take it apart, I wouldn't recommend it. Other than for cleaning, of course, for like oiling the gearbox or doing improvements, but try not to have to take it apart. And like all airsoft guns, treat it like it's a precious item. Don't abuse it, don't beat it up, because I could see these plastic things breaking if you abuse them too much. And of course the metal likely isn't steel, it's mostly a composite metal, so it's not meant to take too much abuse. It just gives it some weight, some real feel, and it can take more abuse than plastic, but don't abuse the gun. That goes for any airsoft guns. Don't beat them up, because that's how they break all too often. So with that being said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a shooting demonstration, first with the dovetail sights on the left target, then with the peep sights on the right target, and then I'm going to do a full auto demonstration on both targets. So I'll see you in a moment, and you get to see some of the accuracy. Remember, this is about 65 feet shooting. Okay, so here we go. This is going to be about 65 feet. The one on the left, I'm going to shoot using the dovetail sight. The one on the right, I'm going to shoot using the little peep sight below the dovetail. So you can see the difference that it makes as far as accuracy. Again, firing 0.25 gram BBs at the target at 65 feet. Okay, so what you can see here is what I was trying to explain with the overhop issue. I was aiming here with the dovetail sight, and look where I hit. And the tree as well. I was aiming here with the peep sight, and look at that. A lot better. And I can imagine the size of the target too. It's pretty small. It's about 6 inches across, so it's not very large. But you can see the difference between the dovetail sight, shooting way up because of the overhop, and the regular, the little peephole sight below the dovetail. So it does make a difference. And why, if you get this gun, I recommend using the peephole sight. You want to show them, Nathan?
Yeah.
Right there. Yep. Thank you, Nathan. Hey, Nate.
And one down there.
And one down there. Say thank you.
Thank you.
So if you get this gun, I'd recommend using the peephole sight below the dovetail sight, because again, it's going to improve your accuracy quite a bit. So just go back to the gun real quick and cover a couple of little things I haven't yet, and then call it a wrap. Okay, here we are back at the gun again, and one thing I hadn't covered yet was one big advantage that the gun does have, and that is the battery space. The battery is put here in the butt stock of the gun, inside the hollow butt, and how you access that is open this little lever here, which probably would have had the oiling can on the original gun, and pulls out and sits right in, and it can hold a fairly large battery, which is great for battery life, and it just sticks right in, flip around, close that, and it's good to go. You can fit just about any airsoft battery in there, which is a great advantage for those who only have a certain type of battery or want a big battery to hold a lot of capacity to last a long time. So it does have, it does have its pros and cons like any airsoft gun. It has good side, has bad side. As you saw with the overhop, can be an issue if you use .20s, and these are even .25s. You can see how much of an overhop it had. If you imagine .20s, would be pretty bad. So that's the only recommendation I'd say is use a heavier BB. It'll help negate some of the overhop on the gun. And if it's a great gun, then I use this for my Fallout outfit, but it's good for World War II reenactors. It's good for anybody who wants to do like a 1930s or a 1940s look, maybe a gangster look, which I think would be pretty cool if anybody comes out and does that. I've been tempted myself just for the fun of it. And it's just a fun weapon overall. Or if you just want to do it as just a fun gun, something different than the modern firearms, I definitely would say if it's the kind of gun you're looking for, then definitely buy this. Please move, little man. Thank you. Sorry about that. And sorry, I was off my train of thought. And from there, I'd like to say thank you for watching and have a lovely day.